Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Trevor always believed that building a solid life required discipline, patience, and mutual trust. At 44, he'd achieved stability as an IT consultant, working from home 3 days a week and occasionally traveling for meetings with corporate clients. Melissa, his 40-year-old wife, was a marketing manager at a growing tech company, always polished, always busy, always wearing that smile that had first won him over at a mutual friend's party. Their 15 years of marriage hadn't been perfect, but Trevor never imagined they could be so far from what he thought was real. Their routine ran like a Swiss watch. Trevor woke up early, made coffee, and checked emails while Melissa got ready for work. She left at 7:30, and he stayed until 9 handling remote tasks before heading to the office when needed. Dinners were sacred when they were both home, and weekends were for TV marathons or walks in the nearby park. Friends envied them. Family members held them up as an example. Trevor took pride in that, in the patient construction of a life that seemed immune to the chaos he saw in other people's marriages. On an ordinary Tuesday in October, Trevor was wrapping up reports when he realized he'd forgotten to send an important document to a client. His personal laptop was dead, so he grabbed the notebook they shared for household tasks, online shopping, and trip planning. He opened it and saw Melissa's email was still logged in. It wasn't intentional, but the browser showed her inbox open. Trevor was about to close it when a name caught his eye, Daniel. The subject line of the most recent message read, "Can't wait for tomorrow night." Trevor felt something strange run down his spine, a twinge of unease he tried to ignore. It was probably just a coworker, he thought. Melissa always mentioned meetings, corporate events, networking. But something made him click. The message opened, and Trevor read the first lines, "You're even more beautiful when you're nervous. Tomorrow I'll make you forget everything, even him." He read it again, searching for context that might turn it into something else, anything other than what it appeared to be. But there was no alternative explanation. There was only the raw truth staring back at him from the glowing screen. He scrolled down. There were dozens of messages. Hundreds, maybe. Weeks of conversations he never knew existed. "My love, you're everything I've ever wanted," read one from Melissa. "I can't stand pretending I'm happy at home anymore," said another. Trevor kept reading, each word cutting deeper. There were photos, images he recognized from the hotel room where they'd stayed on their last anniversary trip, but on different dates, with someone else. Daniel. Always Daniel. Trevor closed the laptop slowly, as if a sudden movement might break something beyond the screen. He sat there in the silent office, listening only to the hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of traffic outside. His first reaction wasn't anger. It was utter confusion. How hadn't he noticed? When had this started? How long had he been living inside an elaborate lie while believing he was building something real? But Trevor wasn't the kind of man to act on impulse. 15 years in tech had taught him that information is power and rash decisions are costly. He needed more than emails. He needed the full context, undeniable evidence, legal protection. So Trevor made a cold, calculated decision. He would investigate, document everything, and only then confront her. Not because he wanted to drag out the pain, but because he wanted complete control when the time came. That same night, while Melissa showered and hummed a song Trevor didn't recognize, he decided to look more closely into the devices and accounts they shared. He recovered conversation histories saved in the cloud and automatically synced to the tablet he kept locked in his office drawer. When Melissa got out of the shower and lay down beside him, Trevor pretended to be asleep, carefully controlling his breathing as she checked her phone one last time before turning off the light. The next day was silent torture. Trevor went to the office as usual, but his mind was on the hidden tablet and the synced records of their shared accounts he'd been quietly reviewing. During his lunch break, he locked the office door and opened the device. That day's messages were even worse. "Tonight at our usual spot, 7 p.m., Daniel wrote. I'll be there. Told Trevor I have a dinner with a client, Melissa replied. Trevor read it 3 times, memorizing every word, every punctuation mark, as if they were pieces of evidence in a courtroom. At 7 that evening, Melissa texted to say dinner would be late, the client was demanding, and she didn't know when she'd be back. Trevor replied with a thumbs-up emoji, the same casual response he always gave. Then he checked the synced message history and saw references to an apartment hotel in the western part of town, about 20 minutes from home, which, based on their conversations, seemed to be where they usually met. Trevor noted the address, saved a screenshot of the conversation, and recorded the time. To him, it was the first concrete proof that Melissa was lying about where she'd be that night. For 3 days, Trevor lived 2 parallel lives. By day, he was the attentive husband, asking how work was, making coffee, smiling at the right moments. By night, he was the meticulous investigator, reading every message he could find, saving anything that might serve as proof that what he believed was solid was actually crumbling. The messages between Melissa and Daniel were devastating not just for their romantic content but for their casual cruelty. They made plans for future trips. They laughed about everyday situations. And, worst of all, they mocked Trevor. He hasn't suspected a thing, he's so pathetic, Melissa wrote in a message Trevor read at 2 a.m. while she slept beside him. He actually thinks we have a perfect marriage. Sometimes I feel sorry for him, but not enough to stop, she continued. Daniel replied with a laughing emoji. He seems like the type who'll cry when he finds out. It'll be awkward. More laughter. Trevor read those words and felt something inside him freeze. This wasn't just betrayal. It was utter contempt, a mockery of the life he thought they were living. By the 3rd day, Trevor had enough evidence to crush any attempt at denial. He had screenshots of clearly romantic and incriminating messages, photos of Melissa and Daniel in romantic settings, bank transfer receipts showing Melissa paying for dinners and gifts for Daniel, and a 5-minute audio file where she described in detail how she planned to, eventually, file for divorce once the situation became more financially favorable for her. Trevor listened to the entire audio without blinking, then saved it in 3 different places. Then it was time to act. Trevor didn't want public drama yet, he didn't want to expose everything before securing proper legal protection. He scheduled an urgent consultation with a divorce attorney, a middle-aged man known for being relentless but fair. Trevor showed him all the evidence. The lawyer flipped through it with the neutral expression of someone who'd seen worse stories, then looked at Trevor and said only, "You've got a solid case. We'll make sure you're protected and that everything is handled fairly." Following the attorney's advice, Trevor moved a portion of the joint account's funds into a temporary account in his name alone, just to prevent unexpected withdrawals until the court officially settled asset division. The attorney explained that in cases like Trevor's, judges often considered the full history of the marriage, including proven infidelity, when deciding how to divide assets, and that Trevor needed to act quickly to protect his interests. Trevor also changed passwords on their shared credit cards, blocked access to the digital safe where they kept important documents, and prepared a complete dossier with all evidence organized chronologically. Then, on Friday night, Trevor set up a dinner at home. He bought ingredients for Melissa's favorite dish, grilled salmon with asparagus and Sicilian lemon sauce. He set the table with candles, played soft background music, and opened a bottle of reserve red wine they'd been saving for special occasions. When Melissa walked in and saw the setup, she smiled in surprise. "What's the special occasion?" she asked, hugging Trevor from behind as he finished the sauce. "Just wanted to do something special for us," Trevor replied, his voice betraying no emotion beyond artificial calm. They ate while talking about trivial things. Melissa mentioned a new project at work, complained about a demanding boss, and asked about Trevor's clients. He answered mechanically, watching every one of her gestures, every fake smile, every lie wrapped in performative affection. After dessert, Trevor poured more wine and leaned back in his chair, finally looking directly at Melissa with an intensity she couldn't ignore. "Are you okay?" she asked, sounding slightly concerned. Trevor took a sip of wine, tasting the bitterness, then set his glass down with a soft clink. "Melissa," he said calmly, "I need to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest with me." Her eyes widened slightly, but she kept her composure. "Of course, honey. Anything." Trevor took a deep breath, then looked straight into her eyes and asked the only question that mattered, "Do you love him?" The silence that followed was absolute. Melissa blinked, either confused or pretending to be. "What? What are you talking about?" Trevor didn't look away. "Don't pretend you don't understand. Do you love him?" Melissa let out a nervous laugh, the kind people use when they're buying time to think. "Trevor, I honestly don't know what you're talking about." "Who?" She tried to sound offended, but there was a tremble in her voice that gave her away. Trevor leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and said just one name. "Daniel." It came out calm, almost casual, as if he were commenting on the weather. But the effect was immediate and devastating. Melissa went pale. Her eyes widened, not with confusion, but with pure panic. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Trevor kept watching her, giving her enough rope to hang herself with her own words. Trevor. I don't," Melissa stammered, struggling to form coherent sentences. Trevor raised his hand to silence her. "Don't lie to me now, Melissa. I know everything. I know about the hotels. I know about the messages. I know you laughed at me, called me pathetic, and planned to leave me when it became convenient for you." Each word came out sharp, controlled, no shouting, no drama. Just facts delivered with surgical precision. Melissa started crying, tears smudging the makeup she'd carefully applied hours earlier. "How did you find out?" was all she managed to ask, and Trevor nearly laughed at the audacity of the question. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't deny it. She only wanted to know how her secret had been exposed. "Does it really matter?" Trevor replied. "What matters is that for months, maybe years, you've been living a lie. While I believed we were building a life together, you were tearing it all down behind my back." "Trevor, please, let me explain." Melissa reached for his hand across the table, but he pulled away. "Explain what?" "How you betrayed our trust. How you mocked me with your lover. How you planned to drain me financially before filing for divorce." Trevor listed each point, counting them off on his fingers methodically. Melissa sobbed louder. "It was a mistake. I was confused. Daniel made me feel." "No," Trevor cut her off mid-sentence, his voice finally revealing contained anger. "Don't blame him. You made choices. Conscious, deliberate, cruel choices. You didn't accidentally fall into bed with him. You planned every meeting. You lied about every fake dinner. You laughed at me while I trusted you." Melissa covered her face with her hands, but Trevor had no compassion left to give. He stood up, went to the office, and returned carrying a brown folder. He placed it on the table with a dull thud that made the wine glasses tremble. "Here it all is," Trevor said, opening the folder to reveal stacks of screenshots organized chronologically. 3 months of messages. Photos. Audio recordings. Bank statements. All documented, dated, ready to use. Melissa looked at the contents and more tears came, but now they were tears of desperation, not regret. "Did you hire someone to follow me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I didn't need to," Trevor replied coldly. "You weren't exactly discreet. But yes, I documented everything. And I've already spoken to a lawyer. Divorce papers will be filed Monday morning." Melissa lifted her face, eyes red and desperate. "Trevor, it doesn't have to be like this. We can talk, try couples therapy. I promise it's over with Daniel." "Over?" Trevor almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Melissa, You texted him today at 5 saying you could barely wait for the weekend you two planned by the lake. Do you really think I believe a single word coming out of your mouth now? Melissa fell silent, out of arguments, out of excuses. The mask had completely fallen. Trevor pulled out a chair and sat down again, but not in the intimate way he had before. He was physically present, but emotionally he'd already left the marriage. I want you to understand something, he said, his voice low but firm. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because you destroyed 15 years of trust, and I won't live a lie anymore. You'll get your legal rights, but I won't cover up the truth if anyone asks why this marriage ended. Melissa started to protest, but Trevor raised his hand again. Your parents will know. My parents will know. Our friends will know. And Daniel, Trevor paused, savoring the moment, will find out he wasn't the only one living a lie. Melissa's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Trevor picked up his phone and pulled up a series of screenshots he'd saved from social media profiles. Did you know Daniel has profiles on 3 different dating apps? All active. All with recent photos. He showed her the screen, and Melissa watched with growing horror. While you were planning your future with him, he was setting up dates with other women. There are screenshots here where he uses the exact same lines on other people. The same promises, the same recycled declarations. Trevor scrolled through the captures, showing how he repeated the same words in messages and comments to different women. He doesn't love you, Melissa. You were just another one. Melissa covered her mouth, visible nausea on her face. That's not true, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Trevor closed his phone and put it away. Believe whatever you want. But the truth is, you destroyed a real marriage for a fantasy. And now you'll have to live with the consequences. He stood up, picked up the evidence folder, and walked toward the guest room. I'll sleep here tonight. Tomorrow we start sorting out our belongings. Monday morning, my lawyer contacts yours. If you don't have one, I suggest you hire one fast. Melissa remained seated at the table, surrounded by the remnants of the romantic dinner Trevor had prepared as the backdrop for the end of everything. She tried to speak, tried to argue, but Trevor had already closed the guest room door and locked it from the inside. Outside, he could hear her sobs echoing through the house that would soon no longer be theirs. But Trevor felt no satisfaction. No sense of victory. Only the crushing weight of 15 years collapsing in real time. In the days that followed, Trevor's life became a whirlwind of legal procedures, difficult conversations with family and friends, and the painful task of dismantling a shared life. Melissa tried several times to reopen dialogue, ask for forgiveness, suggest fresh starts. But Trevor stayed firm. He'd crossed a line with no way back. His lawyer was efficient and relentless, ensuring every piece of evidence was properly submitted, every asset protected, and every one of Trevor's rights fully exercised. One of the harshest consequences for Melissa came when Trevor, following advice from a friend who worked in corporate HR, decided to send a formal report to the Human Resources Department at the company where Melissa and Daniel both worked. In the email, he described, without sharing intimate details, how their relationship had begun during work hours, used company resources, and created a clear conflict of interest since Daniel indirectly reported to the division Melissa managed. A few weeks later, after an internal investigation, Melissa was fired for violating the company's code of conduct, and Daniel received a formal warning and was transferred to another branch in a different state. When Melissa found out Trevor had been the one to report it, she called furiously, shouting accusations of cowardly revenge. Trevor listened calmly, then replied with the same coldness he'd maintained since their confrontation, "You destroyed our life. I just made sure the rules were followed. If you lost your job, it was because of your own actions, not mine." He hung up before she could respond. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Trevor kept the house after paying Melissa her court-assessed share. She got the car and a significant portion of their investments, and received no alimony, the judge justified this based on their respective financial situations and the complete history presented in court. In the end, the division was clearly more favorable to Trevor, not out of systemic vengeance, but because the documented evidence spoke for itself. Melissa tried to contest it, but her lawyer advised her to settle. She had no chance of winning. Trevor was leaving a coffee shop on a rainy April afternoon when he saw Melissa across the street. She was visibly thinner, her hair less cared for, her clothes lacking their former impeccable fit. She saw him at the same time and froze. Trevor could have looked away, pretended not to see her, but he decided to face the moment. He crossed the street and stopped a few feet away. "Trevor," Melissa said, her voice small, nearly inaudible over the sound of rain. "Melissa," he replied, neutral. An uncomfortable silence passed where neither knew what to say. Finally, Melissa tried, "Are you okay?" Trevor almost found it funny but held back. "I'm surviving." "And you?" Melissa looked down. "Trying to rebuild. Got a new job. Lower salary, but it's something." Trevor nodded. He wasn't going to ask about Daniel, he already knew the answer. A mutual friend had told him Daniel ended things with Melissa as soon as he found out she'd lost her job, saying he wasn't ready for something serious. She'd tried to reconcile, but he'd already moved on to someone else. The irony was poetic, but Trevor took no pleasure in it, only a distant acknowledgement that karma works in unpredictable ways. "I'm sorry," Melissa said suddenly, eyes welling up. "I know I've said that before, but it's true. I destroyed everything for something that wasn't even real." Trevor took a deep breath. Part of him wanted to tell her she deserved every consequence, that the pain she felt now was only a fraction of what he'd felt when he discovered everything. But another part, smaller but present, recognized she was human, that she'd made devastating mistakes, and now carried their weight alone. "I believe you mean it," Trevor finally said. "But that doesn't change anything. What's done is done." Melissa nodded, tears mixing with the rain. "Have you found someone?" she asked, her voice breaking. Trevor hesitated, then chose honesty. "I'm seeing someone. Nothing serious yet, but I'm open." He saw the pain in her eyes, but it was no longer his problem. "I hope she makes you happy," Melissa said, and for the first time, Trevor believed she was being genuine. "I hope you find peace, too," he replied, surprising himself with how sincere it sounded. "But far from me." Melissa nodded, understanding the message. They said goodbye with a brief wave, and Trevor kept walking through the rain, feeling something he hadn't felt in months, lightness. Trevor didn't look back, not out of cruelty, but because he'd finally learned that looking back only keeps you trapped in pain that should have stayed in the past. Melissa made choices that destroyed everything, and now she lived with the consequences. Trevor had made his own choices, difficult ones about how to respond, how to protect himself, how to rebuild. And though the pain of 15 years collapsing would never fully disappear, he discovered it was possible to carry the scars without letting them define who he would become. That night, Trevor ate dinner alone in his new apartment, smaller than the house he'd shared with Melissa, but truly his. He played music he liked, cooked food he'd chosen, and raised a glass of wine to himself. Not in celebration of vengeance fulfilled, but in quiet recognition that he'd survived. That he'd faced the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged the other side still whole, still capable of trust, still willing to believe that not all endings need to be happy to be valid. And when Trevor finally turned off the lights and lay down to sleep, he didn't dream of Melissa, of Daniel, or of the marriage he'd lost. He dreamed of possibilities, of new beginnings, of the life still ahead. Because the greatest revenge wasn't destroying the person who betrayed you, it was refusing to let that betrayal destroy you. And in that, Trevor had won completely. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.